And so back then, I was a no-name person who just was passionate. And ultimately, my grandmother's my biggest inspiration. And her last words on her deathbed were, "You got to take care of the farm." And ended up running that snowballed into running for Congress in 2018 against Steve King. And we took a district that Trump won by 27 and moved the needle 24 points. We nearly pulled it off. And ultimately, that was the demise of Steve King. And so you look at what we can do here in Iowa. Well, this is an uphill battle, no doubt, but it's a smaller hill than what we were able to do in 2018. And so just a wave, a Democratic wave, is not going to win it here in Iowa. But if we can create that grassroots movement like we did in 2018, that's the type of thing we did. And so back then, when I was pretty naive and casually clueless of what I should be doing, the only thing I really wanted to do was buy a used Winnebago RV, go nonstop and talk to people and welcome people into our coalition. And that's what we were doing. And so every race I've ran, 2 congressional races and 2 state house races, I've overperformed the top of the ticket. Currently, I'm the only Democrat in 42 counties in Northwest Iowa and North Central Iowa at the state capitol. And in Sioux City, I represent a district that Trump won this past year.
When you think about what it takes to win as a Democrat in Iowa, I mean, look, for a lot of people who vote Republican, that is a part of their identity, just as it is for people who vote Democratic. I mean, a big part of my identity, for example, is that I'm a lifelong Democrat, and so it's not as easy to just get someone to shed a major component of their identity. And so how are you thinking about that as you go through the state, as you talk to folks, knowing full well that it's certainly an uphill battle by virtue of the fact that it's not just, we don't have as many swing voters as we used to. For a lot of people, it is an ingrained part of who they are. And we are in a moment of such calcified polarization that, oftentimes just having the R next to your name is enough for the vast majority of voters to say, okay, yep, that's who I'm going to vote for, regardless of policy positions.
Right. And Iowa does have, I mean, we had led the nation in counties that went for Obama that switched to Trump, and they've been Trump the last 3 election cycles. So can we get them back? That I don't know. But what we can do, and this is what I've done in my state house races, is try to get the attention of people who are not planning on voting, who would be on our side. And so what I'd like to do is I go after the B's and the S's, the barbers, the baristas, the bartenders, the servers, and the stylists. Those are people who talk to other people. And that's the type of grassroots things that we need to do here in Iowa to win over votes.
Well, clearly the Democratic Party has a brand problem. And so as you run this race, how are you thinking about that? What issues do you want to see kind of rectified by virtue of how you run your campaign that has plagued the Democratic Party thus far?
Well, I think we need to call out a lot of things. Like currently, we have a GoFundMe broken healthcare system. We have a JBS food system that's not working for folks, and we have a Dollar General economy. And so I'm very much in the anti-monopoly movement. My 2018 campaign, I think I was the only person talking about the Packers and Stockyards Act. It's one of those things where it may not resonate with people from California or New York or in the cities where the Democratic hubs are, but that's the type of things we need to be talking about in the Fort Dodges, the Sioux Cities, the Ottumwas, the Marshalltowns here in Iowa. And so when in my video, my launch video, I say I'm a baseball playing, Monopoly busting, beer drinking, Bible reading, working class, proud prairie populace who's a 6th-generation Iowan from right here in Sioux City. Like that's not necessarily meant for people in New York City. That's for people up in Storm Lake.
To what extent do you think that has an impact? Because a lot of those things, I mean, like, again, we're in a moment of really high polarization. It's often pretty easy to pick out who's a Democrat and who's a Republican.
Right.
If we were
Well, you'd be
profiling,
surprised. You'd be surprised. Like I stop in at diners in these small towns and talk to farmers and talk to them about anti-monopoly situations on how a average farmer is being squeezed between the input prices and on the market side. And when I mention those things, they nod their heads and then they go, "Are you a Democrat or Republican?" And then when you say Democrat, then there's that face
Yeah.
But when we just can talk about policy, now I may not win all their votes. I understand that. But at the end of the day, when they like, "Oh, he's got something," and you earn people's trust and you get out there to the people. That's the big difference that I think my 2018 campaign is we weren't a red to blue district because we were Trump won the district by 27. So we were able to have that freedom to run as Iowans, not run as DC consultants or
Right.
anything like that. And so that's the type of campaigning that I know. And then when it comes to, I play professional baseball. You know, the Democrats really struggle with younger men. I'm around young men every single day, and it's great to have conversations with them. Like, what are you interested in? And not only what are you interested in, how can I get what I'm interested in a language that you would be welcoming for? And
Right.
so that's I do that every single day.
And in terms of like talking to young guys, what are the issues that are resonating most with them? Obviously, the issues that we're talking about right now, because it's in the political zeitgeist and because
Yeah,
it's especially pressing, is these Medicaid cuts that are
yeah,
coming up and food assistance cuts. I'm presuming that young guys are not as moved by the prospect of Medicaid cuts as some other people would be, but I
right.
am curious what moves them.
Well, I mean, my teammates are a small window, and it's Zen and it's gambling online,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
honest. But I
So
mean, God bless my teammates. But like it is, but when I talk about universal health care, that's a significant thing because when I was their age, I had to choose between paying for rent and getting on health care.
yeah.
And my mom doesn't want to hear the answer of what I did. And
Yeah.
the at the end of the day, these guys in the off season, they don't have, if after they're 25, they don't have
Right.
solid health insurance. So
Yeah.
that is a major issue.
Curious how whether the issue of to the aforementioned budget bill, the prospect of 13.7 million people getting kicked off Medicaid, $300 billion gutted from food assistance, if that's broken through in Iowa. And I ask that because the issue of cutting healthcare is obviously potent enough that in 2017 it led to Democrats flipping the House by the biggest margin in modern American history. And so that's no small thing when Republicans
Yeah.
decide to go after a major component of healthcare in this country. But obviously the onus is on Democrats, is on the left, is on this pro-democracy faction to make sure that that message is salient enough that people know what's happening.
Yeah. So not only is it kicking low income people off of healthcare, and at what cost? So billionaires can have a bigger tax break. That's the other part of it.
Yeah.
But here in Iowa, the biggest impact is on all Iowans because most rural hospitals, most rural nursing homes, just medical facilities in these rural communities are so reliant on Medicaid. If we have this drastic of cuts to them, those are all going under. So then what does that mean? That means more stress on the urban areas and their healthcare system and nursing homes that people have been living their whole life in that town. Now they have to travel, whether it's a half hour, hour at that situation to seek care. Like these people have never lived in other places and they're going to have to move because of these cuts.
Well, so here's what I'm having trouble reconciling is you have rural areas like a lot of the areas in Iowa that are going to be especially impacted by these healthcare cuts. You've got farmers in rural Iowa who are especially vulnerable to the trade war, just like they were back in 2019 when Trump did it the first time, and how farmers have never fully recovered from that trade war because when these foreign countries look elsewhere because of the high prices and they go to Brazil or Argentina or Australia for beef, they often stay with those other countries,
Yep.
and so you're never going to have a full recovery to where you were before. American farmers are never going to sell as much beef, as many soybeans as they did before, because when you allow other countries to kind of fill the void left by the U.S., oftentimes they'll stay with those countries, especially because they recognize that their political environment is not going to be as volatile as the political environment here in the U.S. And so we have all of these instances where Iowans in particular are especially vulnerable to the policies that are being enacted by Republicans. And so is that part breaking through? Because so much
But
of
that
Iowa is controlled by the same party that's attacking the interests of their own state.
So this is exactly my point is that what Democrats are offering to these rural communities is rural broadband. And this is not the electrification of what happened years ago and that how Democrats won so many people because of that. That like if you want a game changer in rural America, it's universal health care. You know, I ran in 2018 in the second most agriculture producing district in the entire country, and farmers were being squeezed. And what did the number one issue they were bringing up to me is how they had to work or their spouse had to work off the farm jobs just to pay health insurance.
Yeah.
And so to me, And you look up how Canada got their universal health care. It was Saskatchewan farmers in the 1950s that said we don't have employer health insurance.